Psalm 8, if you want to turn to Psalm 8. I had the subject of authority rolling around in me, but reading the scriptures, it's taking a different turn now. The subject of authority, and it's becoming more. We'll get into that. Let's look at Psalm 8. I'll just start with verse 1 because it's good. Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. You who set your glory above the heavens, out of the mouth of babes and infants you have ordained strength because of your enemies, that you may silence the enemy and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, or a more accurate translation is than Elohim, which is the Godhead. We're made a little lower. That word is not used for angels any other time in the Old Testament, so it doesn't really make sense to apply it here. So I'll say Elohim in case your King James or New King James says angels. And you have crowned him with glory and honor. You have crowned him with glory and honor. Then let's look at Romans 5:17. There's such a closeness that God has to us. I mean, he basically listed us next in line under himself there. Let that sink in some. I'm certainly trying to, and it's not that hard really. You can let the love of God and his mercy and closeness to you really come in waves and revelation if you're just meditating on it, thinking about him, praising him. We can get this closeness to him that we were designed for. So Romans 5:17, for if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ. And that word reign is, in the Greek, there's no argument that word reign means as kings. And what did Psalm 8 say? It said, I've crowned you with glory and honor. Man is God's crowning work. And there's teaching today that exalts earth. There's teaching today that exalts teaching, and just knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge, whether it's scientific or whatever. But God designed man as his crown jewel. And he crowned us with glory and honor. And we reign from that position. Romans, Paul's writing that we reign in life as kings, and Jesus made that way for us to reign in life as kings, just as Adam submitted to Satan and gave up his right to rule and reign. But Adam was created to rule and reign, and Paul calls Christ the second Adam. And so he restored the reigning that we do as kings. It would be neat to see Adam and see what his reign looked like. It would be kind of cool to get a full picture, and one day we'll know about that. But but we can get a New Testament picture of what Christ did. I just began to think about what a king does. It's real simple in a lot of things. I remember in the 80s they did a Conan movie, and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in the comic book, I had a friend that was a real comic book Conan fan. I don't recommend them for children, but at the time, this kid was really into it. And there was one that Conan the Barbarian, and he's out there traveling around. He's kind of a loose cannon. He's just defeating his enemies. Anybody that picks on him's dead, and he defeats this wizard and all this stuff. But there's the sequel to that is him as king. And one of the pictures in my mind in the movie poster or the comic book poster, the comic books I remember, this friend showing me, is just this huge guy, accomplished all this stuff, and then he sits on his throne, having established a kingdom, having made clear his enemies, having built an army. He sits and he's able to rest. And that's a picture of a king. Solomon is the typical king that Christ wanted to point to his leadership. We see Solomon take the reins. There wasn't much war going on then. David was the man of war. And he even told him that. God even told David that. And then Solomon carries on this kingship, and it carries with it a rest. So reigning in life as a king carries with it a rest. We are seated. We can turn to Ephesians 2. This group knows that, but we can just look at that. You were seated with Christ in heavenly places. Ephesians 2, verse 6, raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace in his kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. You could say Solomon's kingdom was that not of himself. It was the gift of his father David. It was not of himself. He's famous for relying on the Lord for wisdom for his kingdom. He's known for his wisdom. He's famous for it. And all he had to do was enter into that rest. So one of the first things a king does, or one of the first things I thought of as a king, is that we're seated. We sit. We're seated with Christ. That ought to give us comfort right there. We're in a good position. The groundwork has been laid. You know, now we just have this area of taking authority and taking the authority that was given us. And so another thing is ruling. A king rules. You know, he can make rules, write laws. But a lot of the Israel's kings, the rules were already written. So I didn't want to spend too much time talking about that. He also decrees things. You know, as a king, well, I should say, a king's rulership, if the laws are already written, really becomes apparent when he's under attack. That's when you see what he has under his command, I would say. You know, it's like an exclamation point to his rule. For instance, if the U.S. were attacked, we would respond quickly, as a kingdom, you could call it. Or if Solomon were attacked, he would respond quickly with the full might of the Israeli army at the time. And they would squash their foes. Then you see this guy rules, he dominates. There are other politicians we see in recent history that they make threats and they make good on them. They're swift to attack the enemy, to put them in their place. And it's a good thing for a strong king to rule quickly and make decisive decisions. And we're in that position. We're in that position. When sickness comes against us, when financial lack, when worry, we're in that position of ruling. We can make determinations over our lives and issue a decree like a king. We can say, you know, it's going to line up this way. I have this real neat friend at work that's from a young age. He's older than I am, a black man from Mississippi. And he didn't complain about disadvantages he had growing up or anything. Like I said, he's older than I am. He could have, but he would just talk to his friends. Somehow, his parents or whatever, he got vision for provision in his heart as a young boy. And he always believed God would take care of him. He used to tell his friends, I asked him if I could use this story actually. He just told me the story yesterday. And I said, I'm going to use that tomorrow. He said, I'm going to have a house by the time I'm 25. I'm going to have a home by the time I'm 25, which was not common in his family to talk that way or act that way. And he said, I'm going to have a house by the time I'm 25. You watch it. And God put that in him. It's just the way he is. And he has a lot of stories like that. But this one, he's walking through the mall one day. He's 23, got 2 kids, I think. And he's going through the mall one day, meets this elderly, she's older than he is. She's in real estate, owns a lot of property. He doesn't know that. He ministers to her. She just breaks down crying. Well, the next day he has a delivery job to do. He ends up making a delivery to this woman's house who he ministered to the day before, had no idea. And she asks about how he's doing and tells him what she does. And he said, I'm going to look for a house one day. And she says, I've got some. I want you to pick one out for yourself. And he goes, I can't afford that. He said, he made $350 a week. And he said, I can't afford that with that. And she said, what can you afford? And he just named his price basically. And she got him that house. But it was because he received from God a word about his life, and he decreed that, regardless of anybody around him, what was going on in culture at the time. He just decided, I'm going to have that. And God just worked it out. He didn't have to strive after it. He has so many business stories like that, like the Duns do, of just God working out things. But that's just a great example, I thought. So we decree things. I know our camp teaches send out angels and do that when we're dealing with things. I've heard Andrew Womack teach a little different side of that. Either way, when you follow the Lord, there is blessing and reward that follows you. And you have authority over that. You can take authority over your life and the issues that surround you. And then a king judges. Let's look at 2 Corinthians 10. Well, this kind of gets into two things. Because a king can fight, he can order war, but a king can judge. But our battle's not physical in this life, and this verse just exemplifies that. 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 through 5. For though we walk in the flesh, chapter 10, 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 through 5. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. See how there's we're casting down thoughts. We're judging thoughts that come at us. Just like, remember Solomon and the two women come, and they come to King Solomon, and they've got a baby, and they're arguing over whose baby it is. And Solomon in his wisdom said, well, I'll just cut the baby in half. And he orders his attendant to cut the baby in half. Can you imagine that? Just the shock in there. And the mom says, no way. The true mom cares about the kid's life first, of course. And God gave him that wisdom. We have people approach us, or we have ideas approach us, and one of them saying, I'm the real idea. I'm the idea you need to listen to. I'm the worry and the fear you need to meditate on. I'm the lack. I'm the sickness you need to listen to. And we need to let God's ideas stand. Just like Solomon let that real woman stand. We put it to the test with the word. Solomon was going to put that baby to the test, put the mom to the test with the sword. We put it together with the word. We put thoughts to the test with the word. And we can divide. We say, no, this is of God and this isn't. This is the real mom. This is the real God. This is God's voice. Excuse me. This is God's voice. This is the enemy's voice. So we judge. That's a king's job, to judge. Remember, people came up there and asked them. Originally God intended that judges would rule, and the people of Israel asked for kings. He's real big into judging. Leadership judges those things. And you're a leader in your life, and you judge those things. You get the opportunity to judge good from evil. It's wonderful. It is really good. And another thing the king did, he was supposed to know the law. David was supposed to know the law, and he was supposed to, and when sometimes the prophets would remind him of it. But there's a passage, I think it's in Deuteronomy, where maybe it's later. But the role is defined. God gives Samuel a vision for what the king's role is going to be. And one of them is to stick in the law and stay with it so that they know God's will. And that really gets them out of a bind sometimes, because they'll review the law and realize, hey, we need to do this or do that. So we need to know the Bible so that we can judge righteously. So that we can, and a king talks, and then he doesn't back down. Even in the Persian kings, remember when the men tricked Darius to defeat Daniel? Because Daniel was their major competition. He was put over everything. And so they're like, we need to get Daniel out of the way. Nebuchadnezzar was gone. Darius took power. And then they want the power that Daniel held. And he held such favor and high esteem with Nebuchadnezzar. And now he wanted that with Darius, or he had that with Darius. These guys conspire. They deceive the king into writing a law, and he can't change the law once Daniel's found guilty of breaking the law, so he has no choice. Reluctantly, he throws him into the lion's den. But our words should be treated the same way as an Old Testament king. We should speak and then expect it to happen, and we should let it stand. Let our decrees be worth something that stands. So what we speak over our life should be worth standing on. It should be the word. We don't want to speak much else. We can joke around, we'll have fun, but generally, and specifically, we really need to watch our words, because we should treat them like a king. A king would have to watch his words. You know, leaders get into trouble when they don't watch their words. We see that in the news all the time. You know, and nowadays you've got sound bites for every little thing that anybody ever said. And so we want to watch our words just like a king. And we carry authority. Well, I think this is going to, possibly because who's here, feel kind of a shift here. But you have authority in your life quite a bit. I remember I was in high school, and I disciplined. I had the authority to discipline my classmates in a position I was put in. And it was really taboo, I didn't know it at the time, to discipline your fellow classmates in the senior class. As a senior, I was put in that authority. There were about 12, or I don't know how many of us there were. We're called prefects. My advisor called us defects. He would tease us. But we were prefects, kind of like if you've ever seen a Dead Poet Society. It was kind of like a boarding school like that. And the guys, it's kind of like an RA position. But when there's an honor case that comes up, we decide on the case. We judge. The prefects and the headmaster, in like 100 and some years of the school, they almost always side with the prefect decision, because it's a pretty balanced group of guys that want to do what's right. They hear evidence, and then they'll dismiss guys out for honor violations, lying, cheating, or stealing. So we didn't have locks on the doors. We didn't have, things weren't locked up, valuables weren't locked up on campus. Every now and then a local would take advantage of that, drive into the campus. Now they have higher security, because in the 90s when I was there, then some locals would drive in and steal stuff and haul it off, But among ourselves, it was almost never done. People rarely ever stole, so rarely did people get dismissed from the school. And we lived under that honor code. It was a really neat experience. Anyway, I disciplined a senior, which is taboo there. It didn't go over well. So there was this guy, I didn't know he was a Satanist, but he told me, I'm a Satanist, and I've read the whole Bible, and I'm still a Satanist, and you better watch your back. And I thought, well, he probably was, he's probably born again or something now, but the guy was, you're in high school, you don't know how serious those threats are, but this guy was goofy enough. I'd seen what he'd done to other people, and I thought, he's goofy enough to do something. I'm just going to read the 91st Psalm, build myself up, and go about my business. Well, I was reading the 91st Psalm. I became aware that there were angels guarding over me. I just got a clear picture of the angels that walked around with me. And that morning I went into the dining hall, and it's a big, I don't know if you've seen rooms like these where a whole banquet's set up, old oak tables, kind of the classic. It's set up like something out of the early 1900s, because that's when, and it's all I don't know if a movie has that picture, I'm trying to think of, but it's all these, large dining tables. Everyone's lined up. You go in a row, you get your dinner, and then you come down. And I walked in there, and kids looked up, and I didn't know what they were looking at. And they said, look at that guy. He walks in here like he owns the place. And they saw that something was different from the previous days. And I was just coming in to get my breakfast with all the other kids. But they stopped eating. I remember the quiet, and they said, why is that guy think he owns the place? But it was just, revelation just dropped in my heart about authority. And later I got several security jobs in Minneapolis where the belief in authority and in my own personal authority kept me safe. If I had guys threaten me on the street there, and my agreement with the Lord was that I'll watch my front, and there's a scripture that I'll be your rear guard. And I said, man, I really need that. And so I had a lieutenant that was a short, wiry guy, about Kevin's height and size, but more muscular and, older, but no larger. And he would always go to the biggest gang member because he had revelation on that. And if he had to break up a gang, he would always go to the biggest guy, the kind of the muscles in the group, and tell him. And he would be looking up at him. He'd go, move, move, move. And he had this real monotone voice. He was Canadian. And I don't know if that gave him his voice, but he had this monotone, kind of flat voice. And I watched that, and I'd been meditating on similar scriptures to him. And people would leave, and I learned, wow, this stuff works because we trust God. You just trust God. And I had a lot of people threaten me. One night, there was a group of kids just robbed a mall. They came to a stop in the campus because it's summertime. Most of the students are gone. I'm guarding this big campus, downtown Minneapolis, right next to downtown. There's the Crips and the Bloods operating at that time, that kind of thing. And these kids crashed this car. Police are all over the place searching bushes with their guns drawn. And I just felt led to go up to them and ask them if I could help. Actually, they approached me. Hey, we think this kid. And instantly, as soon as they asked me for help, the Lord showed me where the kid was. And I said, I think I know where he is. And I walked in this alley, and he's hiding behind a dumpster. And there just wasn't any fear at all. But it was because I started to understand my authority. Because I would tell the Lord, my boss asked me to do this. If he asked me to do this, it's like the centurion. Once you're a man under authority, if God's given authority to that position, you have authority in that position. Well, we're running out of time. But it's deciding where that pastor was. I was discussing the message with Pastor, and he mentioned the term jurisdiction. If 1 John says, all authority has been given unto me, or Jesus said in John 14, I think it's John 14, but he said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth, and therefore go, wherever that is. You guys know. That wasn't in my notes. Here, hold on. I really wanted to cover this. He said, all authority has been given unto me. But you have, it says, greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. We have authority we haven't realized yet in all areas of our life. Who you submit to is important. Who you marry is important because you share an authority with your spouse. And it's really powerful, the authority you have among each other, the authority you have in your children's life, the authority you have to change a workplace, all authority. If you can discover from the Lord where your jurisdiction begins and ends, you have all authority. For instance, if you're praying for someone and they say, just, be it unto me according to your word, that type of faith and trust in the Lord, like you just pray, I need the Lord's help. You have pretty much all authority, full authority, but they have to give you that. I don't pray for people real quickly because I don't know where that is, but I'm learning. And when you do discover where that line is and what people will give you, you can really achieve awesome things. And signs and wonders follow your words. They follow the word. And it's just discovering where that is. I'll recommend these books. I wanted to get this in just to close because there's so much, and I'm just touching on just a few topics. But it's so important to us. Like, if you're believing for your city, if you're believing for your nation, it's so important to know, like, there's a stronger authority we get as a corporate body here going out into various communities, Apple Valley, Eagan, Dakota County, wherever we live, Minneapolis, where we work. There's a high level of authority. There's the Believer's Authority by Andrew Womack, and there's the Believer's Authority by Brother Hagin. And there's the Triumphant Church by Kenneth E. Hagin. And I recommend the Believer's Authority and the Triumphant Church by Kenneth E. Hagin. And then Andrew Womack has different revelation, different scriptures, and they vary in the origin of Satan. But don't let that hang you up. That does not change our authority at all. But they vary in their origin of Satan. It's okay. It's okay. They both have scriptures. They both, they both believe what they believed, and maybe some of them have changed their minds since they've taught that. But the establishment on the Believer's Authority is huge. It's just priceless. So I wanted to pitch those, and that's something where you can really go study, or those of you listening online, you can really go study those 3 books, The Triumphant Church, The Believer's Authority, whether it's by Kenneth E. Hagin or Andrew Womack.